Is Amy Ashton, and I am board chair of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and I have the pleasure of introducing our 4 presenters today for my favorite part of the summit, the Pecha Kucha session, and I did have to Google how to say that. I'm gonna admit that. So speaker number 1 today, she'll be starting us off. We have Ria Hudabarrett-Lowe, and she is the transportation manager at the City of Mountain View. She is just such a thought leader in the transportation field. She has a PhD in city and regional planning from Berkeley. It's amazing. She's taught as an adjunct professor. I know her as such a collaborative problem solver with regard to some really tough transportation issues, Bayshore, in the City of Mountain View. She'll be talking today about the holy grail of Bay Area biking, protected bike lanes on El Camino, specifically those going in Mountain View. So it's very exciting. Following Ria, we'll have my fellow climate rider, Lauren Ledbetter, who is a senior transportation planner at VTA. And for anyone that doesn't know, VTA is the transit operator and transportation agency for all of Santa Clara County. Since 2013, Lauren has effectively managed VTA's bicycle and pedestrian program. She works closely with local jurisdictions to plan and implement bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that we all love. Lauren will be thrilling us with visions of a bicycle superhighway in Santa Clara County. Following this, we'll have Vignesh Swaminathan. He is CEO and president of Crossroads Labs, which is a municipal and transportation engineering company specializing in planning and capital improvement projects. He works on those very complex intersection geometries that I struggle to understand, and he focuses on building out protected intersections. So hooray for that. Vignesh will be discussing those quick build infrastructure projects that have been so important to keeping us sane during our COVID crisis. Last but not least, we'll have Rachel Fay, who is a public access program manager at Peninsula Open Space Trust. She's worked across the United States and internationally, designing and implementing public access projects from concept to completion. Her expertise really lies in planning and identifying critical regional trail connections, especially ones that connect urban areas to rural open spaces. And again, this has been so important in times we're living in, like right now. So Rachel will be enticing us with the concept of development of a regional trail network in the Bay Area. As per usual, put any questions in the chat box, and this will be quick and snappy. So I'm looking forward to it. With that, Deanna, I think you go ahead and start that.
I guess I'm first.
Oh, we're going out of order.
That's totally fine.
Go for it.
I like to get around under my own power. I enjoy walking or biking to go to the store, to pick up my kids, to go to work. And when my family moved to the South Bay 7 years ago, we looked for neighborhoods that would allow us to bike to work. Fortunately, that meant that anything connected to the Guadalupe River Trail was in play. That also meant that a lot of other places weren't in play because those neighborhoods weren't connected to the rest of the county with high quality bikeways. I'd have to bike on expressways or 8-lane arterials or ride through freeway interchanges, which is not my idea of a nice ride. What if all neighborhoods could access a network of continuous, high quality, uninterrupted, long distance bikeways that cross the county? Biking easily from one city to the next, crossing over creeks and under railroad tracks, experiencing the joy of nature, stopping for coffee, or picking up fresh strawberries from a roadside stand. I work for VTA, the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. We updated the countywide bicycle plan 2 years ago. The plan formally introduced the idea of a network of a dozen bicycle superhighways. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about the conceptual network, what's built, what's getting built, and what could be. The bicycle superhighway network builds off the county's existing 200-mile trail network. The Bay Trail provides east-west access along the bay. Other major trails along waterways like the Stevens Creek Trail and the Guadalupe River Trail give you north-south access. The big challenge, however, is east-west travel. With the exception of the Bay Trail, there are no long-distance east-west bicycle connections across the county. There are also few opportunities to build bike paths on dedicated rights-of-way. Instead, we'll need to work with the community and cities to redesign streets to provide a trail-like experience. And VTA is starting that process now. So what is the bicycle superhighway experience? What will it feel like? For the trails, wide, smooth, bright reflective paint, clear signage, amenities, frequent maintenance, and fun artistic treatments and access to nature. You can easily travel over freeways, over rail lines. They're destinations. How do we translate this or something similar to the on-street bikeways? It depends on context. And following design principles: make bicyclists safe and comfortable, allow bicyclists to travel at a reasonable speed, and minimize delay at barriers. The Calabasas Creek Trail in Santa Clara has a great on-street portion. Along Calabasas Boulevard and Pomeroy Ave, the city has installed buffered bike lanes, wayfinding signage, green pavement, and kiosks with maps. It's very easy to navigate. You can see the little blue wave icon that's placed throughout. In some areas, separated bikeways may be appropriate. San Jose has rapidly built out a network of physically separated bikeways and protected intersections in its downtown and is now expanding out. One potential bicycle superhighway, Berryessa Road, has bike lanes with a painted buffer now, but is slated to be upgraded to a separated bikeway and would connect directly to Berryessa BART. In some cases, the superhighway may need to travel through smaller residential areas. In that case, less heavy-handed design is appropriate. Palo Alto has excellent examples of bicycle boulevards using design elements to slow cars to bicycle speed so they can coexist on the same roadway. How do we address barriers? If you can, go over or under. Stevens Creek Trail crosses over 85, under El Camino Real, and over 237, Caltrain, Central Expressway, 85 again, Middlefield, Moffett, and 101, providing an uninterrupted bike ride from homes to jobs in the North Bayshore area. If it doesn't make sense to build over or under, minimize how long bicyclists need to wait to cross the road, and make that crossing easy and fast. San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail crosses Monroe Street using a diagonal bike crossing and signal, and Calabasas Creek Trail on the right here makes it very easy for bicyclists to trigger a light to cross El Camino Real. How do we knit it together? One example, the Peninsula Bikeway. Cities from Redwood City to Mountain View have teamed up to identify a near-term north-south bike route roughly parallel to Caltrain and El Camino Real. They've installed branded signage directing bicyclists through the neighborhood route. Long-term, the idea is to provide a more direct route along El Camino. We want riding to be a fun, joyful experience. The bike superhighways should not just be commute corridors, but destinations. Community gathering spots, places to be surprised by art and to take a deep breath. Joy should be instilled throughout the network, including the on-street portions. That's the vision. And it's actually happening, one trail segment, bike lane, and bike bridge at a time. Palo Alto is building a bridge over 101 to replace the seasonally flooded undercrossing at Adobe Creek. It's under construction and scheduled to open in 2021. San Jose, on the next slide, has received funding from VTA's 2016 Measure B to design the rest of the Coyote Creek Trail, and right now is designing the section that goes over under 101. Soon you'll be able to bike to take Coyote Creek Trail to the Berryessa BART station and connect up to the Bay Trail and all the way down to Gilroy. VTA is finalizing a design on a bike path that connects Central Expressway to the Guadalupe River Trail, spanning 101 north of the airport and going under the southbound freeway on and off ramps. This is part of a larger interchange redesign. The bike ped elements are 15% of the total cost of the project. VTA is also working to close those east-west gaps. We are partnering with the city of Santa Clara, the county, and San Jose to identify a 10-mile alignment for a bicycle superhighway that parallels Central Expressway El Camino Real and connects Santa Clara to East San Jose. It's the Central Bikeway Study. We'll be kicking that off this fall and working very closely with the community to define what it will be. There's so many more projects that the cities are taking on that I can't fit it into this 6 minutes and 40 seconds. But I want to leave you with this. We can build a bicycle superhighway network in Santa Clara County, and the cities have already started making the connections. And My hope is that the bike superhighways will be so useful and important that they become part of people's mental map of Santa Clara County.
Great, thanks, Lauren. All right, off to my presentation. My name is Rachel Fay with the Peninsula Open Space Trust, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the Bay Area Trails Collaborative. POST, the Peninsula Open Space Trust, is a member of the Bay Area Trails Collaborative, which is a project, a Trail Nation project of the Rails to Trails Conservancy. So I will share that national and regional vision of those organizations and collaborations and how POST contributes. So the Bay Area Trails Collaborative is a cross-sector coalition working to create a connected regional trail system for the 9-county Bay Area. And it's a unified voice made up of professionals with great expertise and capacity in the trails and greenways field in the Bay Area. And BATSI is part of an even larger vision to create a powerful trail and active transportation network across the country. And this regional trails network is a national example of what is possible when we connect people and places by trail. So it's really all about the power of partnerships. And these are some of the types of organizations and agencies that are engaged in the Bay Area Trails Collaborative. And this powerful expertise combined is what helps build momentum and leverage our expertise to move forward. POST is one of these partners. And together we recognize that there's many regional benefits to having a regional vision and a connected regional trail network, including enhancing our quality of life and achieving other priorities such as protecting the environment and promoting social equity. And the way that BATSI goes about this effort is to promote the vision of a 2,500-mile connected trail network. I'm doing a tremendous amount of really critical advocacy for increased funding for trail development and maintenance, and information sharing among all of our members. And there's been incredible accomplishments through this collaboration, and including creating one map that shows the entire regional trail transportation network put together. This is a sampling, a high-level version of what it looks like. And BATSI has selected 13 priority trail projects. One of them is a project I work on at POST that I'll share in a moment. And the goal is to elevate these 13 regional trail priority projects and put them together to assemble a 2,700-mile connected network of recreation and transportation trails that connect people to our iconic landmarks and diverse communities and important destinations. So now my role, I work at POST, the Peninsula Open Space Trust. POST protects open space on the peninsula and in the South Bay for the benefit of all. And we protect land, and often we acquire land and steward land and transfer land to our public open space partners. And over our 70+ year history, since 1977, you'll see what the public open space looked like on the peninsula, and now closer to what it looks like now. And POST has contributed to protecting nearly 80,000 acres of open space. We have 4 programmatic areas. One of them is the public access program that I lead, and our vision in this program is to create a connected network of regional trails and open space to be enjoyed by all. We have 3 other programs: wildlife linkages, redwoods, and farmland programs, and each of us work on different conservation values when we're protecting land. So in the public access program, we have 5 regional trail priority projects. Letter A is the Bay to Sea Trail, which I will be talking about today, and other top tier regional trails that we're working to help connect through land acquisition and other planning are the Coastal Trail and the Bay Area Ridge Trail. The Beta Sea Trail is unique. It will be the first east-west trail along the peninsula that will connect the San Francisco Bay in Redwood City and East Palo Alto all the way 40 miles across to the ocean near Half Moon Bay. And it'll also connect 4 north-south regional trails, including the Bay Trail and the Coastal Trail and others in between. It's a collaboration of a number of really critical partners. We have 11 partners who have come together to sign a letter of intent to collaborate on this decades-long vision. And many of these partners will actually host the trail once it's complete. And then we also have a number of more local and regional partners on the ground working on segments of it, including the segment that we hope to see a bike pedestrian trail along this Dumbarton Rail Corridor. The Silicon Valley Bike Coalition is one of our really key partners, as well as the Bay Area Trails Collaborative, who has selected this urban section of the Beta Sea Trail to be elevated as one of their priority projects in their grander Bay Area vision. This is what the Dumbarton Rail Corridor looks like now, a former rail corridor that we would like to be activated with transportation improvements like rail and a bicycle and pedestrian pathway. So we've worked with the Bay Area Trails Collaborative and other local partners like the Bike Coalition to do some strategic advocacy, and that has included identifying some key points of interest along the route. And we're working with BATSI right now in the Rails to Trails Conservancy to do a bikeable connectivity analysis that will help inform our advocacy and elevate the importance of connecting this rail corridor and the people along it to the open space that it connects to along the bay and in the foothills. So in summary, this is a great example of how a regional vision of a trail has local elements that can be part of an even larger landscape level network of trails. Thank you.
So I think I'm up next. So Lauren and Rachel have highlighted the need for regional bikeways, and I'll be talking about getting them built using El Camino Real Protected Bikeway Project as an example. This project is going to provide protected bikeways along El Camino Real in Mountain View by piggybacking on a Caltrans repaving project. We plan to get the first segment built within 5 years. Like much of Silicon Valley, Mountain View was mostly developed in the post-war era when car-centric suburbanization was the way that we built cities in the US. As Mountain View grew, we addressed growing travel demand by acquiring land and widening roadways. Over the years, we expanded roadway capacity, sometimes at the expense of housing, but we never solved traffic congestion. Now we have a general plan policy in Mountain View that doesn't allow us to widen roads in order to address traffic congestion. This policy reflects the disproportionately large spatial demands of motor vehicles. It also reflects the issue of induced travel demand, which shows that widening roads actually encourages them to fill up faster. With induced travel demand, it's geometrically impossible to solve traffic congestion through continued road widening and car dependence. In a place like Silicon Valley, it's also financially impossible. Instead, we need to invest in making more space-efficient modes like walking, biking, and transit attractive. Effecting mode shift in a space designed around cars requires us to innovate and collaborate. In this context, Mountain View has been collaborating with the cities of Menlo Park, Redwood City, and Palo Alto on the Peninsula Bikeway feasibility study. One of the 3 potential corridors identified as a future Peninsula Bikeway is El Camino Real. The El Camino Real Bikeway project implements part of the Peninsula Bikeway vision for a connected regional bikeway. If the bikeways are to attract interested but concerned cyclists, who are a majority of potential users, it needs to be low stress, which in this context means Class 4 protected bikeways. To move from vision to implementation, the typical process for city projects, capital projects, has 5 stages. The process starts with city visioning and prioritization, then moves to corridor design and implementation through private development, repaving projects, pilot projects, and capital projects. Each stage requires funding and approval from council, as well as community engagement or outreach. For El Camino Real Bikeway, important planning foundations relate in the general plan, as well as the precise plan and then the streetscape plan, which was approved last year. These documents provide the basis for both the bikeway development and the grounds for city to require red curves for all the new developments that come into place between now and when the bikeway is built along El Camino. The streetscape plan was developed in close consultation with other agencies, including Caltrans. Due to the nature of the roadway, the plan doesn't propose any reduction in vehicle capacity. Instead, we plan to repurpose the parking lanes into the bikeways. Based on the streetscape design, there would be class 4 protected bikeways along the corridor with vertical separation, and then where there are pinch points, they would drop down to class 2 bike lanes, which may be used instead. In addition to the bikeway facilities, intersection treatments would provide visibility for both pedestrians and cyclists, and would provide protected intersections across corridor connections. The additional 3 additional ped bike crossings are also planned under the streetscape plan. There's one catch with all of this. El Camino is not our street. It belongs to the state, and so Caltrans owns it and controls the street. We therefore need to work with Caltrans to create a solution that helps them to achieve their vision outlined in their own bike plan, and that provides synergistic benefits for both the city and Caltrans. These benefits come by integrating the city project into the upcoming Caltrans repaving project for the street. This kind of opportunistic implementation reduces project costs for both Caltrans and the city, and reduces construction impacts because you only need to dig up the roadway once. It also allows for a pooling of Caltrans and city funds and results in a better project for users. It is tricky, however. In order to capitalise on this opportunity, city staff have made a case to council to prioritise funding for the El Camino Real bike and ped improvements based on the plan direction, Vision Zero analysis, and the opportunity to save money by piggybacking on the repaving project. As the 4th step in the project process, deciding on which segment of the corridor to design and construct first is a matter of balancing staff, time and resources with considerations about which segments are most likely to be both beneficial and palatable to the community. And this involves parking. For El Camino Real, the parking analysis had not been included in the original streetscape plan grant that we obtained. So we used volunteers from various sections of the city to do our parking analysis in-house. The survey covered a 4-mile segment from 6 a.m. until dusk on 9 days, weekdays and weekends. Typical parking surveys look at parking supply and utilisation. Parking supply is where you can and can't park, and so the places where it's already no parking is blue in this image. And then parking utilisation considers the proportion of spaces that are actually occupied or not occupied during peak times, and that's shown in green for the ones that were not occupied. So we found that 37%, there was 37% utilisation, peak utilisation for much of the corridor, which means that 63% of the time, 63% of the spaces are unoccupied. We also looked at parking availability off street. On the basis of this this work, council approved the segment from Sylvan Avenue near Sunnyvale to Castro Street as the first segment to be designed and constructed with the repaving project. The project will address what's currently a high stress corridor. Just as importantly, it will provide the first piece of a regional bikeway corridor in Silicon Valley. As we move towards implementation of key bikeway corridors, we transform the bike network from an archipelago of small bikeable segments into a regional connected network. Doing so through repaving requires careful planning, collaboration, relationship building and allocation of resources.
Hello, hi, my name is Vignesh and I'll be talking about quick build during a crisis. My colleagues here, Laura and Rachel, have talked about long-range regional projects, and Ria has talked about CIP projects, but I'll be talking about operational projects that can be implemented within a year. What we see here in the area is we see different neighborhoods have different types of infrastructure. Atherton, which has always been a historically affluent neighborhood and is not in the flood zone, and East Palo Alto, which is in the flood zone. East Palo Alto does not have drainage. Atherton does have drainage. So when we talk about quick build, we have to address these kind of issues. We are Crossroad Lab. We've been working on quick build projects, capital improvement projects, bike ped projects for some time. We helped develop the Don't Give Up the Intersection guidance, and we've done pop-up projects in and around the area. And we've learned a lot over the last few years in experimenting and working on these type of projects. What I will talk about a little bit today is the history of quick build and why we do what we do. So at the end of the day, we are all water-based civilizations. So from the beginning of time, our cities are built around water. And so we've always had areas that are flood zones that are not flood zones, and desirable land is the area that's not flooding, and then non-desirable land is the area that does flood and has disease, mosquitoes, and other types of poor qualities. Throughout our history, we've had the Ohlone tribes who navigated along our rivers to breaking up everything into Spanish ranches to building highways through neighborhoods, and then using agriculture. We've always worked with water. What you see on the bottom is the standard details from 1846, 2 years before slavery was abolished. We still been having curb and gutter and standard details here today. What we talk about typically for capital improvement projects, we try to do green infrastructure to let the water filter into the ground. We try to create regional trail areas to allow for wildlife corridors and pollen and bees to pollinate. And we have flooding situations that we try to address using larger capital improvement projects. So why do I talk about this? Is because we're talking about quick build. Quick build leads to eventual capital improvement project. When we do a capital improvement project, it's a permanent installation. It typically has utility, drainage, flooding, other environmental projects piggybacked on that. And that delays the project. It makes it a long time and makes it Frankenstein. When we do something very quick in a demonstration, we can get something done rapidly. There's many departments that have interest in doing these kind of projects, starting from the city manager, working your way down to public works or DOT. There's a lot of need for these type of projects that can enable the city to do work quickly and effectively. And projects can stem from many different areas, such as grants and the private sector. At the end of the day, capital improvement projects are about plans, specs, and estimate. And we have to value the economy and the environment and equity, and we've negotiated with our traffic engineer about the economy, our civil engineer about the drainage and the environment, and our planning department about the equity. At the end of the day, what really enables all of us as advocates is creating an exhibit, a cost, and memo. Quick build comes in many different forms during this crisis, whereas putting in tents and spaces for homeless to sleep gives them the ability to regulate their sleep cycles and be able to come up from where they are, to projects on the bottom right where we've planning on a diversion in Emeryville, and we're doing a quick build diversion or road closure just to test out and see how the community likes the road being closed before we implement this. Now, why don't cities do this all the time? It's because capital improvement projects are expensive. The city has standard details. They have standard details for curb ramps, but reconstructing just a 5-foot driveway requires us to redo every single driveway to make it ADA compliant. And so you can see how complex these plans get and how we have to knock on every single door and get an encroachment permit and mess with every single person's driveway just to reconstruct the sidewalk. So how do cities pay for this kind of stuff? So cities have fees, money that goes into their operational budgets, and one of the secret sauces is having a stormwater fee that gets added to every property owner. And this stormwater fee, in Cupertino, we voted on a $56 stormwater fee that pays for street sweeping, paving projects, and more, and keeps our PCI rating up high compared to other cities. Now, this is different from how projects are typically done during the design bid build method, where the community is not in control and the contractor is in control. Where we need to go to is an integrated project delivery method, where the community and activists and advocates can able to go pitch projects to the city, and there's constant collaboration and doing it with paint and post. Now, the community is yearning for this. Folks like Palo Alto have rejected full feasibility studies and full analysis and put a team together and created their own community meetings and created their own renderings because of frustration with the process. What you see on the right is Seattle Chaz Chop, where protesters blocked up the street, and eventually the city responded by doing a traffic control plan. So there's a lot of need for this kind of and yearning for quick change. Protected intersections are not going away. They're going to be here for a while, even after COVID. And so this is a typical protected intersection. The goal is to make sure that high-speed vehicles cross a bike more perpendicularly and safely. And that's the future goal. So in the interim, we develop these kind of same projects that instead of doing curb and gutter, we do it with a double white line that simulates a curb from legally from the CBC. And so by putting a double white line opposed to a solid line and a dash, we're able to legally reallocate the space from the corner. Now, why do we want to do this now? It's because this is what's going to, people are going to say no to. Your traffic engineer, your environmental engineer, everyone's going to say no to this type of work. But what we can do right now, when we talk about parklets and slow streets and reallocating space, we can pull the edge of travelway into the roadway and make those hard decisions now. And then eventually, once the Travelway is defined, then we can rework the area in between with paint, post, curb. But in the now, we can do this. This has resulted in many of the projects that I've worked on. Some of the big highlights are San Jose, where we have this very complex project where it's super complex. We have every single bicycle class and its cousin going from class 3 to class 2 to class 4 and protected corners. Very confusing for us to figure out. A lot of vetting needs to be happened to actually get this. But in reality, all this is just reallocating the space. All we are doing is we're pulling in the curb and we're just setting up space, and we could put benches, we could park, put dining, we could have places for people to eat and hang out. But all we're doing is reallocating the space. So these hard decisions of reallocating the space is really the crux of holding projects back. And we don't need that conversation to hold the projects back when we can make that conversation now, because it's just 2 lines and a curve. And so instead of doing projects where the community leaders talk to city staff and we have signature projects as capital improvement projects, we can have ongoing projects with community consensus using quick build. And we've seen that in a lot of cities that started this quick build process. Cities like Oakland are having areas where they can paint a town and they're able to go and bring in community to do art in the ground. Issues with this is actually drainage issues that are underneath the artwork, but the city does this to eventually get the momentum to do these kind of projects. There's many different ways that projects are initiated, but at the end of the day, it requires us as the community to rally them up, and we should wait for it to come from the top down.
Wow. Thank you, everyone. That was absolutely amazing. I feel like my mind is spinning a little bit. So we've got some questions here. So maybe we can start with Ria. What is the timing on the El Camino project? I know a little bit about it, but my understanding is that it's phased, and obviously there are different issues with different sections of El Camino. Is there a time for the entire section to be done? Are there only planned short sections to be done? What's kind of the trajectory?
So our plan is to incorporate Sylvan to Castro, so that's from kind of close to Sunnyvale to downtown, into the repaving project. And the repaving currently, I think, and maybe someone from Caltrans can correct me, but I think that they currently have the schedule set for 2022, but I expect it to go a little bit later than that. Within 5 years, I think is what we're expecting. The segment from Castro to Rengstorff is a segment that is entirely within the city of Mountain View, but we would need to get some direction from council because there are some parking issues there. So there's a trade-off between the benefits in terms of safety for cyclists versus the parking concerns. And so that would be a policy decision regarding that. There are some properties that are also turning over. There's a lot of redevelopment happening within Mountain View, so it's possible that some of those parking issues may resolve with some of those developments. And then the segments on either end, they're kind of further out. We don't have a schedule for them yet. For the segment from north of Castro, we are requesting that Caltrans incorporate the lane narrowing into their repaving project, so that it's striped as if there was a parking protected bike lane, and then when we get the approval on our end and some funding, we can incorporate that down the track without having to restripe the whole street.
Okay. And then let's see, I've got a question here about the funding, which you kind of mentioned, I saw in the chat box, and I'm not familiar with SHOP, SHOPP. So is the funding on the class 4 segment on El Camino, is that happening through the SHOP, or it sounds like the city's paying the difference between repaving and repaving of bike lanes, I guess?
Yeah, so there's, I believe that there's actually 2 Caltrans projects. One of them is repaving, and then the other one is some ADA upgrades to the pedestrian facilities to bring them up to the current ADA standards. And I think that both of those are happening through the SHOP program, or maybe it's just the repaving and the other one's coming from somewhere else. And then we have some city funds. We also won some Measure B funds, And so we'll be providing those to Caltrans and doing a cooperative agreement with Caltrans, and Caltrans will deliver the entire project based on, you know, the design that we agree on through the cooperative agreement. It's kind of complicated. So yeah, but that's the plan.
And how was the how did you find the negotiation with Caltrans? I was actually involved very peripherally for a very short time. How was it going?
I've got to say, I have been pleasantly surprised about the interactions with Caltrans. I think that Caltrans has been evolving, and it's kind of, you know, they've been open to the partnership, which, you know, has not historically been our experience. So I'm, you know, I'm very optimistic about how it will go, because so far the interaction has been good.
All right, excellent. Well, we can move on. I've got a few questions for Rachel here. So is the Dumbarton corridor being planned for a trail to coexist with other transportation options? Once the rails are removed, they're pretty much gone forever. I know the Dumbarton corridor is in a little bit of a pickle, to put it mildly, right now, but perhaps you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Sure. So in the quick 60 seconds, I wasn't able to give full background, but that corridor is owned and managed by Samtrans. And so they have a public-private type partnership with Facebook, who has a consultant team who has led the charge in doing a feasibility study right on the feasibility of a number of multimodal transportation improvements. And they've looked at bus and rail and bicycle and pedestrian, which they've only really done a deep dive in looking at because of our advocacy effort, and thanks to Silicon Valley Bike Coalition. So all of the support of SVBC has really been critical in allowing them to have the capacity to do the needed advocacy on that project. And so they're looking at, it's a multimodal effort. Rail is their primary mode of transportation that they're prioritizing for that rail corridor, a new rail line, and figuring out what types of rail. And the feasibility study is intended to include feasibility of engineering and the types of modes of transportation that could fit and serve the needs of the community, and go all the way to the East Bay. But now the project is a bit on hold with Facebook taking a pause to determine if they still want to continue with their funding and contributions of that project.
Yeah,
so
it would be an expensive one, I'm sure. Different, right? Yeah. So let's see, for Vignesh, could you speak to the environmental review in the context of quick build? I know that CEQA has a lot of, and that's the California Environmental Quality Act, often has exemptions for specific bicycle improvements, especially when you're not talking about removing trees or interrupting significant traffic flow. What's been your experience in the environmental review for these quick build projects?
My experience has been, we want to avoid taking away any lanes or moving any inlets. And so what we do is we end up going from a class 4 or protected bike lane to a regular bike lane at those constrained portions. So we just make it a really, really nice regular bike lane. But we try to avoid taking away any lanes that trigger CEQA or moving any drainage, just because there's a lot you can do with the real estate. A lot of cities have 13 or 14-foot lanes, you know, and there's a lot of ways you could reallocate the space with just making it to 10-foot lanes now. And just the convincing of that 10-foot lanes is the biggest part. But in reality, there's what cities do, the annual paving projects, and those annual paving projects are already approved by CEQA. And so as long as we don't trigger anything that's more than that, then we can do a lot with paint and plastic. There is a huge community outreach component that we need to bring up that's quite different than regular CIP, where we kind of go through the environmental process and the communities involved, and then there's the planning effort where there's designs that are concept designs and shown. When quick build, we kind of just do 100% and we let people comment on 100% plans and move things around. And so it's a little bit of a different process of being involved from the early stages to more like, hey, we're paving, What do you think about this? If you really, really hate it, we'll take it out. You know, if you really, really don't like it, we'll take it out. Really, really explaining that to the community at large, and that's I think is the biggest challenge.
Okay, interesting. So a question for Lauren. We at the Bicycle Coalition have been doing a lot of outreach to our members as far as what the most important bicycle issues are for them. And something that keeps coming up are connections between cities regionally. There just aren't adequate connections between Palo Alto and Mountain View, and it just doesn't work. Has VTA been working specifically with cities to facilitate connections? Is that just such a touchy issue, stepping back, or what can we do to help with those connections? Because like I said, our membership is just it drives everyone crazy, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing when you go. I think of one ride on Evelyn when I go from Sunnyvale to Mountain View, the road opens up and it's, instead of a 1-lane road in each direction, it's 4 lanes. Not to beat on Mountain View because it's still pretty nice, but it's just not as nice. I think that, so VTA, one of what we do, and it's not just with the bike connections, but one of the roles that we have is try and make these connections between the different cities. That's the only way we can get stuff done, because we don't, other than the transit areas, we don't own any land, we don't have any jurisdiction. So our main role in the planning area is to make sure that this city is talking to this city and make sure we fully understand the needs of each city, and we try to make those connections. I think there's a role for advocates to do that as well. When you are reviewing updated bike plans, like when Palo Alto starts updating their bike and ped and safe routes to school visions or whatever they're going to include in it, make sure that one of the things you're talking about is those connections. Try to get those connections in. And then I think VTA has long talked about bike connections crossing the county. Our bike plan's been around for many, many years. We have something called cross-county corridors, cross-county bicycle corridors. The super highways are essentially a subset of those, like that we pulled out as the high quality. We think we can focus on these. And we're trying at VTA to sort of shift what we do. We do a lot of cross-jurisdictional work related to freeway interchanges because the cities ask us to build these things, and we have a lot of experience in doing it, working with Caltrans, managing these massive projects. And my hope is that we can start shifting some of our work so we can help where it's appropriate for the bike superhighways. So the Central Bikeway feasibility study that we're kicking off that I showed in the slide is one of the first steps that we're doing. We also have just finished up 3 complete streets corridor studies that look at walking, biking, and transit on Tasman, Bascom Avenue in San Jose, and Story Keys. And the city of San Jose is building out improvements on Story Keys soon.
Excellent. A lot going on. So I guess this is for Vignesh. What's your favorite city to work with, or what are some city processes that work well in getting bike projects built quickly? I think you mentioned, being flexible and working within, I guess, the built environment itself. Is there a particular city that you've had a good experience with, and why?
Yeah, I've had very different. Every city is quite different. I would say that a city that has the person who's doing the bicycle pedestrian work, who's actually talking to me about the different types of designs, actually is respected and held highly in the entire city, because that person needs to talk to traffic, drainage, signal, paving. They need to talk to every single person. And if that person who's managing the job is not listened to by all of the other departments, then the project won't actually move forward. And this is what happens in a lot of larger cities with a lot of different departments. Most cities have Parks and Rec, Public Works, and DOT, and they all design curb and gutter, and they all compete to design curb and gutter. And so in the same city, there's 3 different departments that do the same exact work, and they all don't want to share it. And so it's very hard to get projects delivered in a lot of these cities that way. Whereas smaller cities where there's maybe a few folks who really, really take on more and they carry on multiple disciplines, their projects deliver quite quickly. I really enjoy working with Fremont and Emeryville Cupertino has been great because we did very innovative projects, and Fremont and Emeryville are really moving forward with a lot of great projects throughout the region.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to hear. So how can we pull together a funding request for shop funds for better bicycling on El Camino Real as a regional project? And maybe this is for Ria. And if you could just explain for people who aren't aware, including me, of what shop funds are and whether there could be some sort of a regional effort in order to get funding to build out more of El Camino Real with protected bike lanes.
Yeah, somebody had given the acronym already. I always forget what it is, something to do with highway. Lauren, do you remember what the acronym stands for?
Yeah, I'm looking for what Elliot called it. It's like safe,
state highway operations something.
And protection
In any
program.
case, it's the
Wait, I
main
think you just
Caltrans.
Yeah,
It's the main Caltrans source of funds. And I think that's a great idea. I mean, if I think that we are I think that we were speaking with Caltrans about providing somewhere in the order of like $10 million for the work that they're doing in Mountain View. If it was part of their project, we probably wouldn't need to do that, I'm thinking. But even if there's a city contribution, you know, I think that having that openness to using the shop funds for a facility that's like a regional bikeway facility sounds like a great idea to me. Maybe we can have somebody from Caltrans to comment on that.
a guest presenter.
Yeah.
I would just add that at least in Santa Clara County, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara all have in their bike plans, at the very least, bike lanes on El Camino.
Okay. So I guess this is a question for each of the panelists as we kind of close out here. What advice do you have for SVBC as an advocacy organization in order to help advance these projects more quickly? I mean, what can we be doing to mobilize? How can we support you? What do you need from us, from our membership, from staff? Maybe we can start with you, Lauren, since you're on the screen there.
I'm thinking about the presentation on the Regnart Creek Trail yesterday. And if SVBC can develop and I think you already have this in a lot of ways, but a really broad group of people who are advocating for a similar message and the same thing, and maybe just like focus, I know you have something like 5 different things you focus on, and El Camino is one of them. Focus your efforts on that, put all your efforts into that, and talk to elected officials, because ultimately city staff, we work for the elected officials and the elected officials work for the community. So I think that helps us be able to do that work. And then I would also say, be nice to your city staff. We're doing the best we can, and agency staff.
Interesting. Ria, any thoughts on how we can support you? Is the project off and running and you don't need us anymore, or what can we do?
I think so. I think that what the community has done has been really helpful. We had people turn up at all of the public meetings, so people were tracking the projects. I try and get the word out about when there are, you know, decision points, but we had, you know, people turn up at all of the meetings and share about their experience of riding on El Camino, or their experience. Well, one person turned up to one of the meetings right in this room, and she had had a collision on her bike on the way to that meeting. And I think that we as staff, we can provide the numbers, we can provide maps, we can provide information, but we can't provide the information on the lived experience of the people who are using the facilities. And that's where those stories, you know, they help with the decision making. Decision making is not all rational, and it helps to be able to look someone in the eye and see and understand their experience. So I think that has been really invaluable in the process. I think that, you know, this is one segment, so there's plenty more work to do on, you know, segments beyond this.
You? So speaking of that, just one follow-up question there. So sounds like you did a large parking effort, and that really helped bolster support for the project, probably with council. I mean, you're right, having the data was invaluable. How can we replicate that? Do you have a staff report you could point us to as to how other cities could replicate that? Because I think it's going to be an issue in every city, or it has been an issue in every city.
Yeah, I actually put a link to the staff report. It was not actually the final report for the streetscape plan. It was earlier because we wanted to start collaborating with Caltrans before the project was completely finished. As soon as we were done with the parking analysis, we kind of decided which segments we wanted to go for. So it's in the chat, the link to that. And if anybody's interested in getting like the spreadsheet, you know, I can provide that as well, city staff or whoever.
Who doesn't love data? All right. And Vignesh, what can we do to support you? I know your projects are, like you said, within the curb gutter, but they probably still require council approval oftentimes. Is it really just showing up at the meetings? Is it letter writing? What is it? Community outreach? What helps?
Okay, personally, I don't think it's none of the above. I think what's what's really tricky for the cities is they can look at designs in other cities, they can look at presentations, they can hear from all the folks, but the traffic engineer and the civil engineer have not seen it in their own city where they spent the last 30 years of their career. And so for them, that traffic engineer learned from another traffic engineer from that same city who spent another 30 years in their career and previously. So that intellectual knowledge is only in one city. And they have, maybe the city engineers have not worked in other cities. They've only learned everything from that one city. So of course it's like, oh yeah, we've never done that before. Why would we ever do that? Like that doesn't happen in our town. Like that's obviously the first things that come up to every civil and traffic engineer. And we work with planners, we work with advocates, but they're really trying to convince their civil and traffic engineers of this type of work. So what I would say, what I've seen a lot of success with is having at least one pilot project or one corner, one thing that the city engineers can go look at and observe. SUPC is doing a great job of doing the rides, of going and showing what other cities have been doing. But like I said, it's not in their city. So they're like, that's not going to work in my town, not with my constituents, not with my council members. And so doing that in the ground in their own town, maybe it's having a few posts just get relocated to every single city so people can observe. I think that really, really does volumes to both the community, the council, and the engineers, just to be able to observe something functioning that's not going to break the system in their own town. And then once we do that, then we can do all the above that you said. But that knowledge gap is missing, and it's been missing for 4 or 5 years, and we're still missing, you know? And so we need to bridge that knowledge gap.
Yeah, those entrenched designs and thought processes and ways of doing things when someone's been doing it for 25 years. I can see that. So Rachel, we haven't forgotten you over there. What can we do to support your work as well? It's so interesting, it's so essential, and it's so broad. You know, what are your roadblocks? What can we do?
I would say keep doing what you're doing. Your team has been really critical in being the backbone organization of a network of different advocacy interested or advocacy partners. And we found that this with the Dumbarton Rail Corridor, that the Bike Coalition's critical role as convener, as leader of a network of agencies and organizations interested in seeing a bicycle pedestrian trail on that corridor has been really critical, and staying on top of what's going on the ground and tapping into all of the partners in that coalition to bring forward their expertise, which is each unique, has really helped our project move forward. We're looking at something that has been going on for decades in the making. So I'd say just maintain your patience, and we will too.
Excellent. Well, let's see. I don't want to get in trouble for going over time. This has been so great. Thank you, everyone. I did notice there were a lot of questions about maps, and I just wanted to plug that SVBC does provide a wealth of maps on their website, and we might have to touch base with all of you and make sure we have your organization's bike and hiking maps on our website. And then also I just want to plug, we can't get these projects done without support of our membership. It's so valuable. So if you are not already a member, I would encourage you to join. We're as strong as our membership. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to all our speakers. And let's see, I believe we have another session starting shortly.